Okay, now that you have a few people that you think might be a good fit, let's talk about the sample process. Before you do anything, make sure to add your product specs and documentation on distro. That way, when people make your samples, they have all the information they need to make your products. Okay, so once you have a good fit, I suggest creating a legal contract to make the samples. Personally, I use Rocket Lawyer. They're not a sponsor, but it's just what I use and they make it super easy. Here are some key things to include in the contract. First is pay, which in some cases won't be necessary. Some of the best people I work with sent me free samples, and that showed me a lot about their desire to work with me. Plus, the quality came back great, so hiring them was a no-brainer. If you're requesting free samples, as long as you're sending them the supplies and materials that they need, plus reimbursing them for the shipping, many are happy to do it for free, especially with the hopes of working with you long term. This is going to be a much different experience if you requested samples from a contract manufacturer, where a couple prototypes might cost you hundreds if not thousands of dollars. Next to include in the contract is turnaround time. Set the expectation for when you expect the samples to be sent. I've personally never set an expected turnaround time, although sometimes I wish I had, and the only reason I don't is because that's yet another way for me to see whether they're a good fit or not. The ones who send samples the fastest, I tend to favor over the others. Either way, you'll understand who's the most excited to work with you. Once you've sent out the contract and you've both signed it, that's when you can send the supplies and materials they need to make the samples. This is also a perfect time to invite them to your Organ distro so they can access the product specs and documentation they need. You can do this by going to admin, then entering their email and clicking invite. From there, they'll get an email invitation to join your Organ distro where they can access product specs and documentation. Okay, let's talk about the actual sample process. For the number of samples, I usually ask between 2 and 3, since this gives them a chance to improve quality with each piece. The number of samples is up to you, but I find that 2 to 3 gives me a good idea on what kind of quality I can expect. Once you receive the samples, that's an exciting time. But just understand that they're not going to be perfect. Aside from quality, there's a number of other factors you should consider when reviewing candidates. Keep in mind the things I mentioned before. Things like ambition, communication, and ability to learn and adapt. I've received samples that weren't perfect, but I knew they understood the fundamentals and I knew they could improve. Also understand that the more times somebody makes something, the better they get at it. If you're still not comfortable but you see potential in someone, this might be a good time to do a second round of samples. Personally, I only just do one round of samples, and before you make a decision, ask yourself if this is someone you want to work with long term. And not just someone you want to work with long term, but someone you can trust. A huge aspect of this is trust. If you don't trust the people that are sending out your products, that's going to be a problem. And some people won't be a good fit. They'll lack the very basic attention to details that you're looking for, and that's okay. Not everyone is going to be a good fit. The key is to get samples from as many people as you can to find the right fit for your business and for you. After I've made a decision, that's when I'll send them a review of the samples. Regardless of whether I want to work with them or not, I'll send them an email with pictures of all the details that they might have missed, or things that I expect to be improved. And I'll write a short explanation of each so they understand my expectations. Even if the samples are perfect, I still point out minor flaws so that they have an expectation that I have high standards, which will ultimately help you ensure quality. At the end of the email, I'll let them know whether I'd like to work with them going forward or not. If it's not, I'll simply thank them for the samples and say that it might not be a good fit. And if they agree to work with you going forward, it's time to get excited. I mean, isn't it crazy? Someone made your products and you didn't have to spend thousands of dollars getting samples for these? You should be pretty excited. Once you come to an agreement, create a long-term contract to make it official. And once they sign, you're off to the races. In the next video, we'll talk about how to send actual customer orders to your new makers in Distro. Let's head there now.